And so if the kids continued to struggle, it felt like it came back to me. Like, I'm not sacrificing enough. I'm not being proactive enough. Every time a kid would have a behavior, I would think, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? What could I have done differently? I always tell parents we need a working definition of success. Like, I need to know what parents' definition of success is so I can help them get there. And my number one rule is it has to be something that's within their control.
Parenting and adoption isn't about perfection. In this conversation with Melissa Corkum, we're going to talk about redefining success in parenting for your family. What's your connection to the foster care and adoption space?
Well, my connection, Trisha, started very early. I'm actually a Korean adoptee. So adoption has been a part of my story for almost my entire life. I was adopted as an infant to the United States. And obviously always knew I'm a transracial adoptee, so there wasn't really any hiding it. I have two siblings who also came to our family through adoption. And I also have a personality that kind of sees the bright side of everything. So it took a long time for me to understand kind of the impact of adoption and some of the harder grief parts. But when I got married, my husband wanted to adopt before we had even met. So that was an interesting part of our story. So we have 2 kids by birth and 4 through international adoption.
Wow. You're not kidding. You just live and breathe. And it's really, I always like to say it's in your DNA for sure at this point, that adoption. And so that's going to really speak volumes in our space. So walk us through that parenting journey and how those children came into your family, and just kind of tell me a bit of the backstory there.
Yeah. So again, started with 2 kids by birth. We always joke, like, they were 3 and 5 when we adopted our youngest son, and we just really thought we had parenting all figured out, which is so laughable now, right? 3 and 5. I mean, the kids are all 18 and older now, so we've lived a lot of life since then. I just think, oh gosh, Melissa, so naive. But they were great kids, and we really attributed the way we were parenting to the way that they were turning out, which, it sounds so awful to say out loud now. So adopted in 2009 from Korea. We brought a toddler home who, as it turns out, is neurodivergent and has a variety of different needs, but a really, really neat kid. And he is the one that pushed us into that land of, like, oh, all the tools that we thought we had, that we thought were fail-safe and worked, actually didn't. And so he's the reason we found kind of trauma-informed, trust-based parenting. And then again, you'd think we would have learned our lesson. We thought, now we know. Like, now that we have this trauma-informed parenting, we've got, like, now we have the tools. We didn't have them before, but now we have the tools. And so then it's a long story, but the short version is we brought home 3 unrelated older kids from Ethiopia in 2012. Wow. They were all older than our oldest son at the time. They were 11, 13, and 14 when they joined our family. And I mean, it took our family into just complete chaos for like 3 to 4 years. And it's been incredibly redemptive, and we've learned a lot. But that's a little bit of our story. So now everyone is 18 to 27.
Wow. You're courageous. You're brave.
I think we were just young and naive with a lot of energy.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of us we relate to what you're saying, because we thought we knew what we were doing. We didn't know what we didn't know. And so walk me through those early expectations that you had of what successful parenting would look like, and how did those expectations begin to change after adopting?
I think, like a lot of parents that I talked to, I thought that how my kids were doing was a reflection, at least partially, to how we were doing. And maybe not in the little moments, I did understand, toddlers had their moments and things like that, but I think from like a 30,000-foot view, it was like, if my kids are doing well, we're doing well. And even when we started to learn about, like, what's the need behind the behavior? How do we meet the needs of kids with different types of neurodivergence? It shifted what we thought success was. Like, before, success might have been just like strict behavior management. Now it turned into like, okay, if a challenging behavior means that there's an unmet need, now if I, as the parent, can meet all the needs, if I'm doing that well, then we must be doing it right. And so if the kids continued to struggle, it felt like it came back to me, like, I'm not I'm not sacrificing enough, I'm not being proactive enough. I like every time a kid would have a behavior, I would think, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? What could I have done differently? And so even though there was a shift in how we managed behaviors, it still felt like the responsibility was on me as the parent. And I mean, we got to days where, like, my bar for success was pretty low. It was like, "Oh, we didn't call the police today." It's a successful day. Um, and it was really coming into the space of starting to coach other parents and thinking about, like, what am I promising when I sell something? Like, what am I can't I certainly cannot promise to change other the behaviors of other kids in other people's families when I can't even do it for myself, but I still felt like I had a lot to offer in terms of tools and things we had learned along the way. And so it was through that process that I realized, oh, like, this has to be about what we're doing as parents. Like, that has to be success, and the outcome can't be tied. Like, if we did the best that we could, that has to be success, and we have to learn how to differentiate ourselves from whatever's on the other side of that. And sometimes it works out really well, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I hear you saying we're in charge of our output, but not the outcome of the kiddos. How would you recommend that parents start to define, if they wake up in the morning, kind of what's the target, what's the intention of to define success for themselves? What have you come to find after years of now coaching parents, not just doing it yourself? What would you say the bar is for success now?
I always tell parents, well, when we work together, I always say we need a working definition of success. Like, I need to know what parents' definition of success is so I can help them get there. And my number one rule is it has to be something that's within their control, which is tricky, right? And sometimes we do this exercise where we have divide a paper into three, and we write down things we have control over, things we have influence over, and things that we don't have control over. And that kind of helps you know, sift out some maybe ill-conceived notions we've had. Oh, we thought we controlled this thing. We really just have influence over it. Or maybe we don't have any control over it at all. And so that looks like, what are we as parents doing to care well for our nervous system? So the other piece that we talk about is um, this misnomer that our kids' needs have to come first. I think that is born sometimes of our faith backgrounds. Sometimes I think it's society. And I realized that I was living this life where I was spending a lot of energy. If you think of like a upside down triangle, like in three layers, the top layer, like all my energy was going to managing kids' behaviors. I felt like I was like playing whack-a-mole with behaviors. There was six kids, or a lot of behaviors, or a lot of needs. And then it was like, okay, what are the needs? And there was a lot of energy to just meeting needs that maybe even weren't connected to behaviors. It was just like, feeding six kids three times a day, and running around to OT appointments and therapy appointments, and then at the very bottom it was like my needs, and it was like, oh, I'll get back to the gym once we get this kid stable. I'll get back to this hobby that I remember doing, pre-kids when the kids are grown. Like, it's very much like, I'm on the back burner. I just need to, and especially when our older kids came home, it was like, we just need to do this until they're stable, right? Like, we can put anything aside. And then like 6 months turned into a year turned into 2 years. Like, and it's just unsustainable, right? To put your own needs on the back burner for that long. And so now I talk to people about flipping their pyramid, right? So now the triangle's got the base on the ground instead of the point, but the layers are the same. So now you're the biggest layer at the bottom. Then you're proactively meeting your kids' needs. And then at the top is whatever behaviors kind of sift out at the top, and just giving parents permission to say, the number one thing that we can do for our families when we have big, challenging behaviors is take care of our own nervous systems, because we shouldn't underestimate the incredible power, the neurobiology of what it means to be okay in our own nervous system. And that means that we get to prioritize things like going to the gym and making our own doctor's appointments and going to our own therapy appointments, even when it feels like the squeakiest wheel, right, is to do all these other things. It feels very counterintuitive, but it's the only thing I found that quote unquote works, right? To changing the energy, the feel of like how successful you are.
All of that. Yep, absolutely. And some of us are slower learners than others. Some of us have to hit a brick wall before we start to learn to fill our own cup and to bring our calm, right? To the best thing we can do is to bring our calm, whole selves to every parenting interaction. And, there was this ideal, right? You talked about you were naive, and there was this expectation of how you thought parenting would look and how you wanted it to be. And what was the impetus? What caused you to move forward into this? Okay, now I'm going to actually do it. Not just think about it, not just, dream about going to the gym or getting back to that hobby. But what was the thing that kind of caused you to tip and to move forward with that journey?
I mean, really, it was survival. I mean, when I say that our house was chaos, like, we were in such crisis. And so for us, it was there. We couldn't keep going the way that we were going. There had to be something different. I always joke whenever we talk about having 6 kids, someone will inevitably, give some kind of line that makes us look like heroes or really great people or, something. And like I said, I think we were just naive and really young and really optimistic. And but I also joke that, like I say, we sometimes joke that like God gives us like, you know, marriages to help us understand like what it's like to live with other people, and like kids to help us, all the cracks and all the things of like what we need to do in our own work. And I'm like, so if that's true, like if you have 2 kids, that means like it took 2 kids to help you learn all those lessons, and we were hard-headed enough that we needed 6 to learn all those lessons, right? So like, I don't know that this is like a pedestal that y'all want to be on, right? We're like looking at this backwards. But I mean, that's what it feels like, right? Like we were stubborn and we pushed ahead through 2 and then 3 and then the extra 3, and we did it for like 9 months, okay, and then all the wheels came off, and they came off in this really dramatic fashion. And so we literally had to do something different. And um and this is what it took to and once you kind of dip your toe in to like a different way, like I'll say to parents like, well, what if you canceled OT for this week and you take yourself out for coffee? Like, what, just notice, like, what does that, like, what do you gain from that? Um, and, and it almost has to be like an experiential, not just in your head. You have to be at at the edge where you're willing to do something different, and you have to take it a little slow because the nervous system doesn't like big change. But it does make all the difference. And it's a constant learning journey. Like, I am not here to say that I'm doing any of this any better than the rest of us, honestly. I just have stuck around long enough to know some of the neuroscience, and I'm convinced, and I've dipped my toe in enough to know that it does work. But it's a process.
Yeah. There are no pedestals in what we do. I like to say we all low crawl in on our bellies, army,
Yeah.
army style every day, because it's just true. It really humbles us. And, if there is a parent that they're listening to this, they're watching this and they're thinking, oh, I'm at that point, like this isn't working. I mean, they have just hit that brick wall of exhaustion. They take nap after nap and it's just not doing it. Nothing is fixing what's going on. What's an encouragement if you were sitting across from them having coffee today of kind of, what's that one little step that they could take that would be an encouragement for them today?
So I am such a huge fan of body work. I stumbled upon the power of it. And when I mean body work, I just mean ways to help our nervous systems and bodies release some of the tension, the stress, the trauma that we're holding in ways that are beyond talking, right? So our vagus nerve, which controls our sensory systems, our regulation, all our regulatory systems, digestion, breathing rate, heart rate, only 20% of those nerve bundles carry messages from our head to our body, but 80% carry messages the other way, right? So when we're thinking, I just need to get up and try better tomorrow, right? That's like a head to body thing. Like, I'm going to feel less stressed tomorrow and I'm going to respond to my child differently than the way I reacted. I'm trying to convince my body, my nervous system to do something differently. It's not really the most effective way, right? Like, because the body is what really responds first and then our narrative follows. So I talk like ad nauseum about we can't just be in talk therapy. We can't just be doing coaching. Or if you're trying those things and you feel like you're stuck, that there are other options. So that's the first thing. And then finding a practitioner, getting into that is a little bit of a bigger lift. So tiny, tiny thing that folks who are listening can do today. We call it points of joy. It's in our book called Reclaim Compassion, which is all about parent burnout, which we call blocked care, is points of joy. So you just get a list and you start writing down as many things that you can think of that bring you joy. And they can be big things, but we encourage there to be a lot of little things. So it could be things like, your hands around a warm coffee mug. Like we happen to be recording this in the winter. The smell of a freshly brewed cup of coffee, the smell of peeling an orange, the sunshine on your face. Trisha, you live with a fantastic view, right, of some of God's greatest creation, right? Like stepping outside and just like taking in the view. Like, these are not big things. They could be your favorite song in the car or whatever it is. But then it's the intentionality of trying to check off, noticing, or intentionally adding at least 7 of those points of joy a day. And that gets you to about 50 a week. And we have done this with thousands of parents, and people continue to come back and say, like, this little thing changed my life because it helped my nervous system tell the story a little differently. Instead of saying, my life's terrible, I can't control, my kids are going to end up in jail, there's no hope, there's nothing I can control, I can't control my kids, the school calls every day, we can start saying, oh, like, there are hard things, and look at all these places where I still have a little bit of control in my life, where I can still notice joy, where I can affect change in a certain way. And that's a really important message to send to the nervous system.
Yeah, I hear you saying we can act our way into right thinking. We can take that action with our body and make choices. And I'm curious, are you willing to share with us kind of what was that moment that you had where you were just like, I have got to redefine success? Like this definition I have today where my kids got to behave, my kids got to be on this track, that track. What was that moment like for you?
I think The most I've struggled around success, we had to place one of our older kids out of our house to keep everyone safe and to get her the level of care that she needed. And, as someone who leads parents in this space, we were one of the first empowered to connect parent trainers. I mean, all of these things, like that felt like the ultimate failure. We can redefine success in a lot of ways, and there were still some, like, lingering things that we couldn't control, like, um, success is being able to keep everyone safe in our home, like, to be able to not even do it on our own, right? We had lots of resources, um, but that kind of felt like, especially as an adoptee, like, the ultimate failure, and I've been able to reframe that a little bit, like, from a medical perspective, if that child had cancer and needed to go inpatient for, 3 weeks of chemo, no one would have blinked about that, right? And so I really had to reframe it as, like, we are doing what they need to get the resources that are necessary, but there's something about, having to move a kid out for mental health reasons that feels very, very different than physical things. And so that has really been a big piece of, like, was that a failure? And fortunately, we're 10 years out from that, and um and have been able to redeem a lot of that relationship, and even have them look back and be like, "Okay, like, I get why that was necessary," and so there's been a lot of grace and a lot of mercy there, but, that's still a hard story to tell in a lot of spaces, and especially in adoptee spaces where I sit as an adoptee, sitting with adoptees who are estranged from their families for a variety of reasons, right? And then I have this story of, like, we have our adoptees were estranged from us, for multiple reasons. All 3 of our older kids have had really we've all had tough parts of our stories, and honestly, like, a lot of that was me with my own undealt with junk that, like, I was an equal, if not greater contributor to how those relationships fell apart in the ways that they did before they could be reconnected.
Number one, I appreciate you being vulnerable and honest and transparent with us. So many of us in this space, we've dealt with that. We've had kiddos go into out of home care, but thank you for taking some of the shame off of that, because it is just something that's really difficult. I've dealt with a kiddo having inpatient, and so really can appreciate what you're saying, that it feels like the ultimate failure as a parent when I can't keep my kid safe in my own home. And as someone who came up through foster care myself, the idea that my kiddo would limp because of my trauma is a very hard reality to face, and a painful thing, for that parent who's kind of maybe not 10 years out like you are now, kind of in it right now, and that's something they're facing or they've just recently faced, and they, are just broken. And really the word over them is failure. They're just feeling like such a failure. What do you have to say to them now that you've got, 10 years of that in the rear view?
I think, one, this living with ambiguous loss, Pauline Boss named ambiguous loss, and she wrote a really great book, about the myth of closure. I think I lived in the space of thinking, if we can just get to this, like, next milestone, then life will get easier or better, and it has in a lot of ways, um, and it's continued to be really hard in others. Um, Most recently, we ended our marriage and sold a house and launched kids, and there's been lots of loss and things that, like, were like, we thought, like, "Oh, we got through this, like, crisis, like, surely we'll, like, make it the rest of the way," right? So you get this, like, you want this, like, false sense of security of, like, "Oh, like, now we get to coast." Um, and so I think what has kept everyone sane and stable through the whole thing is one, our own nervous system care, our own, like, we literally can only control ourselves. Like, so I think another piece of that, like, when we stepped away from our kids' behaviors, it was like, okay, like, but we can create this like stable foundation. And now it's like, oh, well, the stable foundation has shifted in some really big ways in the past year. And so what does that like? So that's left like, oh, like each of our individual selves, even though we're all interdependent, like we're each responsible for like managing our own feelings, dealing with our own stuff, like not waiting for other people to be okay in order for us to be okay. Like, can I be okay when my kids are struggling or they're making their own decisions and now they're all adults? And so like some of them are doing really well and they're all doing really well in certain regards. And some of them are having to learn really hard lessons about, you know, what happens when we make certain decisions. Um and so I think having um a coach or a mental health professional or all of the above, like I have a coach and a therapist and a spiritual director, like we need other people outside of our stories. I think that's the piece. Like when we're in the midst of it, you can spin that story so many ways, and shame can spin that story a lot of ways. And so it's been really helpful to have people that have known me for a long time, known our family for a long time, to say, yeah, like there's things you could have done differently. And also, here's this other part of the narrative that you're missing because your grief has overshadowed that or your shame has overshadowed that. And so I think just having outside perspective to say, um, like, here's where the goal is, here's where you need to keep focusing. And then people who can help with like my therapist does EMDR, and that's been hugely helpful in making sense of um, not just our nuclear family story, but like even how my adoption has played into all the different pieces of our story and what that looks like moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. All the outside voices in our family, we kind of joke and we say our therapists have therapists, but that's really the truth. Like
Yeah.
everybody's in therapy every single week, and we really can't have too many professionals on board when we've got a lot of complex trauma kind of clanging up against each other. By all means, I appreciate you taking some of the shame off that too, as well. I know for some people that's just not how they were raised, and therapy is, maybe not seen as something that's as helpful, especially in Christian circles, right? God can heal it, and He can, and sometimes that's the way that He chooses to do it. If Melissa Corkum could just write the book on the narrative, like here is what successful parenting is, like at the top of your journal in the morning on any given Monday, can you finish that sentence for me? Where are you at today? What does successful parenting mean to you today?
I think it has a lot to do with what's the state of my nervous system? What am I doing to care for it? And then what am I doing from that place to offer connection to each of my kids without expectation? And that's the tricky part, right? Like we're recording this in December, right after Thanksgiving. We just had a Thanksgiving where our youngest decided to spend Thanksgiving with a family, with a friend, not with family. And like the whole family had some feelings about that. And I had to think like, I what would I tell someone I was working with? Like, I do this every day for a living. It was like, okay, like it's okay for me to feel disappointed about that. That's like like all the feelings are valid. But also two, it's not his responsibility to be in charge of my feelings of disappointment. So it's really hard. I feel like we did not learn these skills growing up. I don't know what we were learning in health class in middle school. I'm sure it was about like deodorant and body odor and things that are, I mean, important, but like, gosh, what a gift if we had had someone say, like, "This is how to have a feeling," and not make someone else responsible for it, right? So I had to be really careful about, like, not being like, "Gosh, we're really disappointed you didn't come home," right? Like, because even though we were, I felt like that had energy of, like, "You should have come home so we wouldn't have been disappointed," which is not, right? Like, in my head, I've done enough therapy to know that that's not the way I want to be anymore, and old behavior patterns are really hard, right? So it was kind of like "Oh, we really missed you. I hope you had a good time." Like, and even sometimes, like, actually saying, "Man, I was disappointed didn't get to see you, but I want you to know that's not on you. Like, I'm gonna deal with my own disappointment this week on my own." You know? And it's just so, like, so foreign, and maybe some other families, like, grew up with all of those skills, but ours didn't. So now we're learning. And so that's what success has been, is, like, how can I what can I do to offer my relationship as a parent, um, and still be okay however that goes. And sometimes it's really fun and we connect and I take my grandkids out for a fun day. And sometimes it's like, yeah, no, you know, I got plans or I'm not interested or, you know, whatever that is.
Yeah, I really, really like your definition there and that idea that I'm responsible for my own feelings and I don't get to put guilt on you with the way that I word it, even the words themselves, but the actual feeling behind them. You're reminding me, I got a book on my nightstand that's called "You Can't Make Me Angry," and it's that same idea that I am responsible for my own feelings and that's not on you. You had mentioned, I believe elsewhere I saw that there's a protocol that you're using kind of to help with your nervous system. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So about 8 years ago, I stumbled across something called the Safe and Sound Protocol. It was pretty new at the time. It was created by Dr. Stephen Porges, who also is the author of Polyvagal Theory, which is this brilliant body of work that explains to us what physiologically is happening in our bodies as we experience stress and also tells us how we can experience safety. I mean, it's just such brilliant work, if you haven't explored it. And so the Safe and Sound Protocol just is an outpouring of that. Dr. Porges figured out that one of the most impactful forms of safety, cues of safety to our nervous system, is the sound of what he calls the prosodic human voice. And we intuitively all knew that. It's how we greet people when we first meet them. We raise our voice just a little in frequency, right? It's how we talk to babies and dogs, people that we know aren't hearing our words as much as they're interpreting our tone. And so our voice gets just a little bit more sing-songy, a little higher. "Hey, how you doing?" Or, "Oh, look at you, you little bit." It's just a little bit elevated. And that is the strongest cue of safety that the nervous system can can experience. And so Dr. Porges figured out how to filter music so that it falls in that envelope of frequency. And so when people listen to the Safe and Sound Protocol, the best way to describe it is they are getting hyper exposed to sounds of safety. And what that does for us is it decreases feelings of anxiety. It changes how hypervigilant we are. Each of our nervous systems has a confirmation bias for all the data it's taking in, and it's either defaulting to protection mode or defaulting to connection mode. And I'm sure y'all have seen that play out. Like, if you've ever offered a snack or offered a bid for connection to a kid and they've been like, "Why are you mad at me?" Or, "I don't want," they've reacted like you're some kind of threat, then their confirmation bias is probably protection. And it has nothing to do with you, right? It's that they are assuming that they are always under threat, regardless of the safety that's being shown to them. They're they can explain that away. That person is just being nice because they want something. That person is not going to be nice tomorrow. Like, there's just so many things that the nervous system can trick us into a different narrative than what is before us. And so safe and sound can actually, for people that are stuck in that protective mode, can actually shift back into connection mode. So even parents who are feeling that blocked care, like they are resistant or resentful towards their kid. Like, I mean, I had many moments when our youngest first came home, when he would get up in the morning and his footsteps would come running. We had a long rancher running down the hallway, and those footsteps in the morning, and I could feel my nervous system like tense up. And he hadn't even done anything. Like, nothing bad had even happened yet, right? And so that's that confirmation bias at work. And so Safe and Sound has been able to reverse that for me. And I've now done it with almost 1,000 people and probably within hundreds of families. I'm able to do it completely virtually, and it's been such a gift to pair with folks that I'm coaching. In fact, I don't do one without the other anymore, because it's such a powerful combination to the psychoeducation of teaching people about their nervous systems, and then paired with this thing that's like, if you think of like our burned out nervous systems as empty buckets, probably with holes, right? Like, it feels like everything we're doing it just isn't enough. We can't get enough sleep to make the tiredness go away. We can't, it doesn't matter how much respite we get. Then Safe and Sound is like the ability to patch that bucket. And then instead of like spoonfuls of water, it's like cupfuls of water to fill it back up.
Wow. So much today. You've shared with us so much vulnerability, really helped us to redefine success, and shared some resources. If our audience wants to learn more about you, where can they find your website?
rise2regulation.com, all spelled out, the word two spelled out. And if you look for my name on Instagram, that's where I show up the most on social media and post a lot about, just little tips and tricks for, how we care for our nervous systems, and just posts that help people know that they're not alone, right? That can hopefully put words to some things that maybe they're thinking and feeling but haven't been able to verbalize or are afraid to say out loud because of that shame.
Melissa Corkum, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Trisha.
Success in parenting isn't measured by flawless outcomes. It's measured by connection. If you found this conversation with Melissa Corkum helpful, please share it with a friend.